Fans of early soul music know the name of Little Willie John. The charismatic singer lived in Detroit, and his music influenced many famous singers who followed in his footsteps. John was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1996 in a ceremony led by Stevie Wonder. A book about Little Willie John was co-authored by his son, Kevin, and Detroit News music journalist Susan Whitehall. Its title, Fever, is named after one of John's first recordings. Take a listen.
I love you, never know how much I care. When you put your arms around me, I get a feeling that's so hard to bear. You give me fever when you kiss me, fever when you hold me tight, fever in the morning, fever all through the night.
Joining me now are Little Willie John's two sons, Kevin and Keith John. Welcome to American Black Journal.
Thank you, sir.
I don't think anybody can hear that song and not know what it is, but also, and the thing about your father that I think is so distinct, it's the voice, the emotion that's conveyed in that voice, and I mean, there's almost a haunting quality to it that's just unmistakable.
Absolutely, and he recorded that song when he was only about 18 years old.
Is that
so
right?
He had a very mature voice
at
a very young age.
Right. So tell me about, you know, and that's one of the most recorded songs. You know, there's lots of other people who have picked up on it and done their own version.
Yeah, absolutely. But the sad part for us is that many people have recorded it, but most people don't know who did it first.
They don't know who did it. And he wrote that song.
Well, no,
right?
he didn't write it, but he was the first artist to record it.
Exactly. I see.
Let's just say he put his fingerprint on it.
His mark on it. Yeah.
The way that we understand is that the song was written kind of one way, and he said, on my terms, I want to do this so that I can feel it. Because he wasn't a big fan of it until he did it. Then once he did it, he put his fingerprint in it. And then everybody that heard it from that point, they got to hear his version.
Right.
So they're like, okay, well, this is, you know, so melodies and things like that were, you know, let's just say very highly influenced by his creative energy.
Right.
And in fact, today, with the way the music industry is today, he might have even gotten writer's credits because he changed the song so much to make it
that
what
they
you hear today.
They would have credited him because it was so different from the original. But of course, this is at a time when all of those kind of things were nebulous, and especially for African American artists, right?
Absolutely. Remember, we're talking about before Motown.
Before Motown.
Many people don't recognize that. They don't recognize that there was a very vibrant music scene here in Detroit before Motown.
Right. And so tell me about his career. How did he come to be the singer here in Detroit?
Well, he kind of grew up in the church, and he sang with his brothers and sisters years ago, you know, before coming into being a professional singer. But then at about a very young age, he decided he was going to go to New York and he was going to get a record deal. And he went to New York and he got a record deal. I mean, it's simple. It's
he just went to New York and got a record deal.
Absolutely. He went and he was in different studios. He was kind of a prankster. He would go out and he kind of left the hotel where he wasn't. We talk about that in the book. He went out and he was recording in the studio, I think, later that evening.
But how common was? I mean, that's not everyone's story. Everyone says, "I want to be a singer. I'm going to go sign a record deal." But that's not.
I guess it helps. It probably helps when you have the gift to back it up.
Well, sure.
He had it good.
He could sing. Right.
Yeah. And we listened to a lot of the people from his day that would tell you a lot of wonderful, heartwarming stories about him and his gift. He could just open up and just let it go.
Yeah.
And you know, if we think about the music scene today, it's so drastically different. Now they talk about auto-tune. He was his own auto-tune. He had a great ear.
It's not a computer.
I'm just going to open up and let this go. And then with all that emotion, and he was so young, but you didn't hear youth in his voice. You heard.
It
sounded like it felt like maturity, and you heard it. It felt like experience, like
Absolutely.
19-year-old singing about fever. Fever. I mean,
what does he know about that?
Yeah.
And even before recording his own record, he was singing with people like Count Basie. Okay. So he loved a wide range of music, not just any one type of music. So he had been singing since he was really young.
I say that all the time, that for people who really appreciate music, and for most musicians, there are only two kinds of music. There's good music and there's bad music, and all of the other sort of categories we come up with don't really mean anything. I mean, if you really are a musician, you can do it under any genre that exists, and he really was a testament to that.
Yes,
right?
absolutely. In fact, Levi Stubbs and Sam Moore of Sam and Dave even said years ago, he said that he had the kind of talent that he could sing the songbook and make it interesting.
Right.
I mean, not the songbook, but the yellow pages.
The yellow
pages. And make it interesting.
Right,
so,
right.
Yeah.
So tell me about writing the book.
Well,
that's got to have been not just the professional experience, but the personal. I mean, this is your story.
Absolutely.
As much as anything else.
Exactly. Well, it couldn't have happened first without my mom. When we had the idea to do it, we went to Mom and said, we got to get you to sign off on that. And once we did that, we had a wonderful experience with Susan Whitehall. She's a fabulous writer.
Yeah.
But we kind of met, kind of strange. We were at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and we bumped into each other. And I said, you know, no one has ever done a book on my dad. And she was surprised. Yeah. And so I said, what do you think about that idea? So fast forward, you know, some months or years later, you know, she wrote a story and included my dad, and I thanked her, and I said, no one has written a book about my dad. What do you think about that? So, you know, we got together with her, we talked about the idea of doing it, and 5+ years later, it was done.
How hard was it to piece together that story? I mean, this is, like you said, before Motown. This is at a very different time in the music industry in terms of just keeping records, I would think. How hard was it to piece all that together?
Well,
we got
lots of interviews.
Yeah, lots of memories, and then too, a lot of he did a lot of interviews with a lot of my dad's friends, old friends, bandmates,
who are still around.
Yeah, and then I was in some circles where I remember I was in New York doing the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and we got B.B. King and we got Jeffrey Osborne, we got George Benson. I was in L.A. and I talked to him, and he said, "Oh yeah, I'd love to," you know, because they all loved him. So they said, "Well, I'll talk about him. I don't do a lot of interviews, but I'll talk about this or I'll talk about that regarding him," because they loved him.
In fact,
he inspired him.
An interesting story too, Stephen, is that George Benson was in New Zealand about to do a concert.
Right.
He called me from New Zealand and said, "Hey, man, I've only got a few minutes, before the show starts, but I want to, you want to talk? I want to talk about about your dad." So people really loved him. Yeah. They really loved it.
Well, and what's interesting about that is that if you say that name in Detroit, where he lived, most people wouldn't know who you're talking about.
And that's
why is that? Why is that true?
Well, because he died. Well, first he was incarcerated.
Right, and that's another part of the story.
Exactly.
Right?
But he died so young. He died before the media thing. In fact, he has the distinction of being the only Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductee that doesn't have any video footage in the presentation.
Is that right?
Yeah. So he died just before all that push for videos weren't done. So people, if they don't see it, especially in this visual age we live today, if they don't see it, they don't recognize it. They don't exactly.
Right.
But you ask those people, like the Stevie Wonders, the George Bensons, the Jeffrey Osbornes, the Gladys Knights, because Susan and I had a chance to interview a lot of people, and they had some really, really great stories.
It's so interesting because if you think about all the people he did get to interview, it's probably as many people that he didn't get to interview. Absolutely. I remember I spoke to Aaron Neville, and when I mentioned my dad's name, his eyes just lit up. He said, I want to be included. And they had so many people that wanted to talk about it that by the time we got to Aaron Neville, his phone number had changed.
Oh,
so, it was, I mean, it was a process, but and the way that New Zealand thing happened is a friend of mine said, "Yeah, I'm going to see George Benson tonight." He hit me on Facebook and said, "I'm going to see George Benson tonight." I said, "I need to speak to him. Can you let him know? Tell him that Keith asked him to call us and give him this number." So he helped us make the connection at that point, because I saw George. I think I saw him after. When I saw him in L.A., that was after that. But and then George just called. He just called and said, "Look, I want to talk about it." And so, And those were the good things that a lot of the people that we went to try to get a little bit of assistance, you know. And then with Stevie, I was on the road. What country were we in? I don't know. We were performing somewhere, and I said, "Okay, Steve," because he had expressed to me that he wanted to be a part of it, and so I said, "Okay, I got to corner him." So I said, "I'm gonna have my recorder and everything ready." I said, "Steve, I need you tonight. I need you to do this this little thing for the forward for the book.
Yeah.
And he said, okay, cool. And then I didn't realize he had 2 or 3 interviews he had to do before he got to me. And then at the end of that, he said, Keith, let's do it. And so we did it.
So he got it.
Yeah, because he really wanted to be. He didn't want that opportunity to.
You know, I'm curious. You do this kind of book a lot, and like I said, it's your story as much as anything else. How much of what you could remember about your dad is reflected in the book?
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot. Susan talked to my uncles and aunts and stuff, the ones that are still around. But she interviewed myself and my brother and my mom.
Yeah.
So a lot of good history from things that we didn't remember until we started talking about.
So you started talking
things
about it, right?
Even things about my mom and dad when they were dating, and
how they met.
Yeah, how they met at the Apollo Theater in New York, and so yeah. It was great, but the reason that when he said earlier that we had, my mom had to sign off, is because we knew it would be a certain amount of emotional attachment to him and his story.
Sure.
And so we wanted to make sure we had a blessing. We wanted to make sure she would be comfortable.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because you don't want to.
Because
and not appropriate.
Exactly.
Right.
Because actually, I had this dream more than 20 years ago. But my mom wasn't ready.
To do the book,
yes,
right?
But she was not ready for it, and it probably wasn't a good time then. But we could have talked to a lot more people then, because they were still around.
Right. Well, that's the thing. If you wait,
absolutely.
You know, people
Absolutely.
go away. The incarceration at the end of your dad's life, and he died in prison.
Yes.
Do you feel like that sort of helps? Is one of the things that made him less well known too?
Absolutely, because he was like on a hiatus. You couldn't see him, you couldn't hear him.
Right.
But in 1966, he did his last recordings, and most people have never even heard them. They were done for Capitol Records, and they were just released in 2008.
Is that right?
By a company actually in the UK. In the UK, they love my dad's music. It's still alive today.
Oh yeah.
It's alive and well.
Yeah.
Right.
But their concept on music there is so different from ours here.
Sure.
I mean, in this country, we tend to be a little more the latest great thing, and our loyalty is not as strong. But they're like music historians.
Sure.
They go back for the old stuff. They don't care as long as they say this is good music.
Right.
They cling to it.
And blues is such a big deal.
Yeah. And another thing, we were thinking my brother's been talking about.
We've got a wrap here.
Okay. He's been talking about trying to get on Unsung. They talk about unsung heroes.
Right.
I mean, all the people that he touched.
Yeah. No.
It's like,
well, it's great that,
unbelievable.
It's great that you guys are here to keep that story alive. And thank you for being here on the show.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah. That's our program for today. Thanks for watching. You can get more information about our guests at AmericanBlackJournal.org. And as always, connect with us on Facebook and on Twitter. We'll see you next time on American Black Journal.